turn to Psalm 23 in your Bibles. You'll find that on page 862 in a few Bibles. That's where we'll be this morning. I know some of you it may be your favorite psalm. What I have to share this morning draws heavily on three sources. What headed me in this direction, first of all, was a book by John Eldredge, which I just finished reading, entitled Get Your Life Back. And he got into the 23rd Psalm a little bit. And then a lot of the material comes from one of my prized possessions. It's a book that was copyrighted in 1904 by William Knight. The title of the book is A Song of Our Syrian Guest. And it's Knight. There was a Syrian guest who was a shepherd visiting him, and he talked about the 23rd Psalm, and this Syrian shepherd shared with him how he saw the 23rd Psalm, having been a shepherd, what it meant to him. And also a bit on J. Vernon McGee's commentary. I'll start today with three questions from John Eldredge's book, Get Your Life Back. Question number one, are you happy most of the time? She's smiling, she's got me, she has to be happy. How often do you feel lighthearted? Are you excited about your future? Do you feel deeply loved? The last question, when was the last time you felt carefree? Some of these questions are asked because of the culture we live in. We're so rushed, we're so harried, there's so many demands put upon us, it seems like we never have enough hours in the day to accomplish everything that's demanded of us. A 2017 study revealed that Americans on average consume 10 hours of media, that is TV, radio, the internet, or mobile devices, and social media, a day. 10 hours a day we consume. That's the average person. I'm not average. Now she's laughing. In response to this information, Eldredge posed these questions. What does the constant barrage of the trivial, urgent, mediocre, traumatic, heartbreaking, or buffoonish do to us when it comes to an unending stream, unfiltered, unexplained, unproven, unexpected, most of it unworthy, yet nevertheless we pay attention to it on demand? What's it doing to us? Nicholas Carr wrote a book titled The Shallows. And then subtitle, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. In that book, he shared the following. In some conversations he had with some very bright men and women, most of them PhDs in their fields, he found that they all shared a similar disturbing trend. They were all experiencing a noticeable deterioration of their attention. These were intellectuals who live in the arena of research and literature, and yet they reported it was hard for them to read books anymore. Articles couldn't hold their attention. Not only that, they were almost too impatient just for a long blog. Carr went on and says in his book that it's documented that the internet is reshaping not only our ability to take in information, it's altering the structure of our brains. We don't like being asked to focus on anything for very long anymore. We're adapted to the quick, short stimulus of the internet and our mobile devices. Did you catch his conclusion? We don't like being asked to focus on anything for very long. That's worth contemplating. Martin Heidegger. He was a German philosopher, and listen, he passed away in 1976, but he wrote this sometime before he passed away in 1976. The frenziedness of technology threatens to entrench itself everywhere. It may be that we are now entering the final stage of that entrenchment. We're welcoming the frenziedness into our souls. I wonder what he would say if he were alive today. That's something worth thinking about. Well, let's go to the 23rd Psalm. I'll be reading from the NIV, but you'll probably notice when I make my remarks, I'll be referring to the King James. It's easier for me because that's how I memorized it. I see a few of you shaking your heads. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Here we find David writing about God restoring his soul. Where did he go, or where did God take him for the soul restoration? He took him out in his creation. He didn't take him into the palace, to the home of a friend, to the marketplace, or even to a counselor, or even to his own home. He went out into nature. Dennis had Wednesday night, this last Wednesday night. He didn't know where I was headed most likely, but he was in Psalm 8. And I just want to share two verses from that Psalm, verses 3 and 4. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? And Dennis posed this question for us, or made this statement. David knew the value of simply considering the glory of God's creation. He knew what it was like to look up into the starry sky and consider what a great God had made this vast, wonderful universe. And considering the greatness of the heavens also made David consider the relative smallness and insignificance of man. David wondered why such a great God would be mindful of such small beings. And then he gives us this handout, this full page, just referring to some of God's creation. Just amazing, the God that we serve. I share that with you just to make you wonder what you missed on Wednesday night. But no, it was very good. It challenged me and my heart. Paul also mentions this in his letter to the Romans, in Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. He had this to say, what may be known about God is plain to them, to mankind, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Well, now, I talked about David going out in nature. Paul writing to the Romans said, you can tell there's a God. All you got to do is look around. Another disturbing study. A 2001 National Human Activity Pattern Study revealed that the average person now spends 93% of their life indoors. That means if you live 75 years, you will have spent 69 3/4 years indoors, only 5 1/4 years outside. Wow. Well, John Eldredge picked up on this, and this is what he had to say. This is a catastrophe, the final nail in the coffin for the human soul. You live nearly all your life in a fake world. Artificial lighting instead of the warmth of sunlight, or the cool of moonlight, or the darkness of night itself. Artificial climate, rather than the wild beauty of real weather. Your world is always a controlled temperature. All the surfaces you touch are things like plastic, nylon, and fake leather instead of the meadow, wood, and stream. We have fake fireplaces, wax fruit, The atmosphere we inhabit is now asphyxiating with artificial smells, mostly chemicals and air fresheners, instead of cut grass, wood smoke, and salt air. In place of the cry of the hawk, the thunder of the waterfall, the comfort of crickets, your world spews artificial sounds, like the clicks and beeps and roar of technology, the hum of the furnace or the air conditioner. Even the plants in your bubble are fake. They give off no oxygen. And if that isn't a signifier, I don't know what is. Well, let's look at what David has to say. You know, he was taken outdoors. He begins with, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. This is a declaration and a deduction. It's one thing to understand that the Lord is a shepherd. It's another thing. You go to the New Testament, and Jesus is called the Good Shepherd, the Great Shepherd. But the question we need to settle is this: is the Lord my shepherd? Can you say that the Lord is my shepherd? You know, by the authority of his redemption work, his death and resurrection, we can trust him. We can call him our shepherd. But is he indeed your shepherd? Can you say he's my shepherd? My shepherd equals submission. If I don't submit to the shepherd, I forfeit many of the benefits. Bob Dylan, in 1979, released this song. The title of it, You Gotta Serve Somebody. And the key phrase that's repeated throughout the song, I'm not going to quote the whole song for you, and I'm certainly not going to try to sing it. But the key words in the song are this: it may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. So the question is, who are you serving? Who am I serving? Then he goes on, because the Lord is his shepherd, he says, I shall not want. He didn't say, I have not wanted, but he said, I shall not want. Well, what is it he might want? What is it that he needed? What is it that I need? I thought about this for a minute. I think I need safety. I need shelter. I need food. I need clothing. And David is saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Why? Because God is taking care of him. McGee said this: I shall not want looks into the future and gives assurance to the child of God. The security of the believer rests upon the shepherd, and the believer's deduction rests upon his declaration that the Lord is indeed my shepherd. Much of what I have to share in these mixed verses draws heavily on the Song of our Syrian guest book. Some of the comments there. There'll be others in there as well. But he goes on, we're now in verse 2. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He makes me lie down in green pastures. That is sufficiency. The shepherd shared that you can tell if the sheep's hunger has been satisfied, because he will not lay down until his hunger has been satisfied. So if he makes me lie down in green pastures, that means he has satisfied my needs. My hunger has been satisfied. Christ is our sufficiency. Remember what Jesus said? He said, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst. And then in the Lord's Prayer, part of the Lord's Prayer is, give us this day our daily bread. I make it part of my devotions every day to go through the Lord's Prayer, and when I stop, when I come to that point, give me this day my daily bread. The cry of my heart is, God, I need you today. I need you in my life today. I can't live my life without you. I need filled with you. So the question I have to ask myself is this: do I look forward to daily spending time being fed spiritually? Do I daily spend time being fed spiritually? Not only does he make me to lie down in green pastures, Later in verse 2, now he leads me beside quiet waters. What do you think of when you think of quiet waters? Once again, the Syrian shepherd had this to say. All through the day's roaming, the shepherd keeps one thing in mind. He must lead his flock to a drinking place. And in that dry and arid land, like David was a shepherd, and he was shepherding in the Negev. The Negev means dry, very few streams. Yes, there were some wells, some fountains here and there, and the shepherds knew where they were, but if they weren't near one of those, they knew they had to find a place where the sheep could be refreshed, where there was water they could drink. Now, the streams are often in gullies and have banks that are too dangerous for the sheep, or the flow is often too rough. You see, sheep fear the current of water. Why? Because with all their will, if they fall in, they're in deep trouble. They're carried downstream. So the shepherd looks for a stream, but not only does he look for a stream, he tries to look for a turn in the stream, according to this Syrian shepherd, where he can maybe build a small dam where the stream turns, make a quiet pool where now the sheep can safely drink. Now, this for me brings back memories. I grew up on Alden Street. Mill Run was in our backyard. And right where Mill Run was, right next to us, the neighbor's place, was a place where the stream made a turn. You know, you think about shepherds stopping and building a dam, that's a big job. Well, not too bad, because some of the neighbor boys and I built a dam right there, just a few rocks, a little bit of mud, a pipe through it, you know, so we thought we could fish it. We didn't catch anything, but we did build a dam. It was easy to build it because the stream wasn't flowing faster because of the turn. And we made a little pool there. So I can picture what these shepherds are doing. So when I am spiritually and emotionally parched, God is going to provide for me a place for my thirst to be quenched. It doesn't count on my circumstances. Where I'm at, it's up to the shepherd. I don't have to find this for myself. Then in verse 3, the King James, he says, he restores my soul. Just for you, Mark, he restores my soul. You were talking about that earlier. He restores my soul. You see, David, I think, thinking about his work as a shepherd, thinking about what he knew, thinking about where God has taken him, he's saying, just figuratively so far, what I have seen, what I've thought about, begins to restore my soul. Restoration has the idea of the rescue of one who is floundering. Spurgeon put it like this: he restores it to its original purity, a soul that has grown foul and black with sin. For what good work to have green pastures than a black soul? This was Spurgeon's thought. But I take us back to Heidegger again. The frenziedness of technology threatens to entrench itself everywhere. It may be that we are now entering the final stage of that entrenchment. We're welcoming the frenziedness into our souls. Stop and think about the world we live in. Can you see how desperately we need to set aside time for soul restoration? It's my contention that we need the peace and joy that only Jesus Christ, the Good Shepherd, gives to restore our souls. Eldridge challenged us in this book, Soul Restoration, our souls restored, getting our life back, and having our souls restored. He said, can you put down your cell phone and shut it off for a couple hours at night just so you have time to be refreshed? Can you turn the TV off? Can you put the computer away? Can you walk outdoors and enjoy what God has made and just spend some time with God being refreshed? Eldridge isn't the only one that recognizes this. Have you noticed that municipalities and colleges recognizing the human need for more of nature. As land becomes available, we're creating green space for us. That's the positive side. There's a negative side to it, though, because while they're creating the green space, the next thing they do is they put up charging stations for all our devices so we can take them with us. We need to get out in God's green space and just spend time with Him. We need time away from all the distractions. I've heard some pastors talk about going to a monastery just to get away from it all. For Linda and I, it has been the Billy Graham Training Center near Asheville, North Carolina. There we receive instruction in the Word. There's indeed time spent in the Word. But more than that, there are trails in the woods. You follow the trails down in the woods, and they have scripture verses here and there on placards down through there. There's a stream that runs down through there. You cross the stream a couple times. You can just get out and enjoy God's creation. If you don't feel like walking down the trail, because you know you have to walk back up, there is a deck there with walking chairs. And you can see 3 or 4 mountain ranges. You can just sit there and enjoy what God has made. They don't even have televisions in the room, so you can't flip on the TV. You find out what the weather is by walking outdoors. Oh, it's sun shining, it's raining, whatever. Nothing to draw your attention away from what you're there for, and that is to reconnect with our shepherd. Well, for each one of you, it may look different. I share with you what it looks like for us. Matter of fact, Linda and I still enjoy just a walk in the woods, even if it's around here. We all have the need for restoration. My challenge to you is to find what will work for you. David goes on now to describe more of the ongoing restoration. Later in verse 3, he puts it this way. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. The shepherd is the guide. The sheep don't need to know where the green pastures are or where the still waters are. All they need to know is where is the shepherd. David knew the Lord would guide him to what he really needed. And Jesus said this, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. We're told, I am not a shepherd, so I don't know. I've never seen this, I've never observed it, I've never been there. But I've read that sheep will follow their own shepherd. You can have a bunch of sheep in the fold, and the shepherd will step up and call for his sheep, and his sheep come. Only his sheep come. Another shepherd will come and make his call, and his sheep will come. Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Do you know the voice of your shepherd? Do you follow when he calls? Do you go where he leads? You see, in Jesus' day, the shepherd never drove his sheep, he led them. I realize that's maybe not the case always now in some of the movies that we see and what have you. But in the time of Christ, the shepherd was with his sheep day after day. They knew him and they followed him. Yeah, I know we want to stray off occasionally. We have the story of the good shepherd going and find the one whose sheep that was lost. But we need to remember to follow our shepherd and not be the one that wanders off. Why? Because our shepherd leads us in right paths. It's up to us to follow those right paths. And those right paths guide us into righteousness, into God's righteousness. You see, God's guidance has a moral aspect. The path of righteousness is the way of holy obedience. Horn had this to say, obstructions are removed, we are strengthened, and walk and run in the paths of God's commandments. Proverbs 3, 5 and 6 tells us this, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Then note how he finishes this little statement. He says, he guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. For his name's sake. It makes me think of people today who are in business. I'll pick on Kevin. I've seen him work in my house. So meticulous. He could almost drive you nuts. Why does he do it? Because his name was on that work. He doesn't want to leave and have someone say, oh, look what Kevin did. It's the same with our Christian walk. We need to be conscious of who we're following. It's for our shepherd's namesake that we are to run and walk in the righteousness of God's commands. My aim should be to display the glory of his grace because of what he's done in my life. Not because I'm good, but because of what he has done in my life. Verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. David now brings us to a dark note. Previously, he's written of green pastures, of still waters, of paths of righteousness. But following the Lord as our shepherd doesn't mean we'll never walk through some hard places. Some paths that are right paths still lead through what we might call deadly perils. David recognized this, that under the shepherd's leading, he may walk through these hard places, through the valley of the shadow of death. However, this wasn't his destination or dwelling place. It wasn't his destination or dwelling place. It's just where he was at this stage in life. Like the preacher in Ecclesiastes, David might be thinking that all of life is lived under the shadow of death. But he's also conscious of the presence of the Lord as his shepherd, and that makes it bearable. How is it bearable? How bearable is it? He said, I'll fear no evil. Despite every dark association with the idea of the valley of the shadow of death, David resolutely said, I will fear no evil. I will fear no evil. Even in a fearful place, the presence of the shepherd banished the fear of evil. Note what he says? I'll fear no evil, for you are with me. For you are with me. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I get into one of these spots in life where things aren't going so great, I wonder where God's at. I know in my heart he's with me, but my circumstances kind of frighten me. I kind of wonder what's coming next. I wonder what the outcome's going to be. And I tend to forget in a moment, my shepherd is with me. Therefore, I will fear no evil. The Syrian shepherd had this to say. This is interesting. I can think of nothing better than the strange thing I now tell you. It's quite beyond the usual daily care on which the flock depends. But I've seen it more than once. Sometimes, in spite of all the care of the shepherd and his dogs, a wolf will get into the very midst of the flock. The sheep are wild with fright. They run and leap and make it impossible to get at the foe in their midst who at that very moment may be fastening his fangs in the throat of a helpless member of the flock. But the shepherd is with them. He knows what to do even at such a time. He leaps to a rock or a high hill where he can be seen and heard. Then he lifts his voice in a long call, something like a wolf's cry. On hearing the shepherd's cry, the sheep remember the shepherd, and they heed his voice. And they do a strange thing. The poor timid creatures, which were helpless with terror before, instantly rush with all their strength into a solid mass around the enemy. The pressure is irresistible. The wolf is overcome. Sometimes he's even crushed to death because the sheep are crowded in so tightly around him. Wow. The presence of the shepherd is one big piece of the picture. But I want us to see another piece of the picture as well. If there were just a couple of sheep there, they'd have a hard time crushing the foe. I want you to know you are important. You are important. When we are gathered together, or when there's trouble around us, the presence of our brothers and sisters in Christ is so important. Why? Because they can join us in the struggle. They can hear God speaking to them saying, my person over here needs your help. He's my child. And we can respond. You see, your presence is important to all of us. We care for one another because we're all following the Good Shepherd, the Great Shepherd. In the end of verse 4 goes like this. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I go to J. Vernon McGee for this one. He had this to say, a rod is for defense and a staff is for direction. He gives us gentle reproof and severe rebuke. He has a rod for our defense, but he also has a staff for our direction. He uses that staff for the sheep that stray. McGee says, that comforts me. He goes on to say, now that I'm getting to be an old man, I look back on my life and I realize that indeed that rod is a comfort. He used it on me several times, and I thank him for it because it got me back into the fold. We all need that. I agree with McGee. I can say the same thing. There are times when I've needed the rod and the staff. And isn't it a comfort to know that our Good Shepherd has that rod and that staff, and he'll use it for our benefit. Now on to the 5th verse. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I've heard this explained multiple different ways. I've had it applied to the Last Supper, when we sit down at the marriage supper of the Lamb and all these things. But the Syrian shepherd had this to say. I thought it was very interesting. The word for table here means something spread out. In our country, what it is often is just a piece of skin or a mat or a cloth spread on the ground. And this is the kind of a table that would be thought of in the life of a shepherd. Along with finding water, he has a daily task of searching out a good and safe feeding place. So, he said, here's what it looks like. All the shepherd's skill and heroic work are called forth in this duty. For it's done in the presence of the sheep's enemies. Well, what enemies are there? Well, there are snake holes in some of the ground, and if the snakes are not driven away, they bite the noses of the sheep. For this, the shepherd sometimes burns fat of hogs along the ground. And around the feeding ground, there may be holes and caves where there might be jackals, wolves, hyenas, and panthers. The skill of the shepherd is at its highest point in closing up these dens with stones or slaying the wild beasts. David gives a beautiful picture. This table suggests bounty. Prepare suggests foresight and care. And before me suggests a personal connection with me. In the presence of my enemies. What a phrase. We need to note that the host's care and concern did not eliminate the presence of enemies. What it does, because the shepherd is there, it enables me to experience God's goodness and bounty even in the midst of my enemies. God's goodness and bounty can have mine to now and in eternity. Spurgeon had this to say, nothing is hurried, there's no confusion, no disturbance. The enemy is at the door, and yet God prepares a table, and the Christian sits down and eats as if everything were in perfect peace. He goes on, you anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. We're now at the close of the day. At the door of the sheepfold, the shepherd stands, and what's called the wadding of the sheep takes place. The shepherd is the door. He blocks the way in, and he looks at each sheep one by one as they go into the fold. He'll turn his body so they can go into the fold. And he has a horn filled with olive oil, and he has cedar tar, and he has a cup. As the sheep go through, he examines them one by one. One sheep has a knee bruised, or his side has been scraped by the rocks or the thorns. He takes care of that. And here comes one that's not bruised. He's definitely worn out and exhausted. He bathes that sheep's face with the oil. And he takes his cup and dips it full from the waters brought for that purpose and lets the weary sheep drink. David, I think, is looking at this and saying, wow. Every day isn't easy. But if I stop and think about it, the shepherd never left. He was always there. As long as I was following, I knew I was going the right way. And at the end of the day, he anoints my head with oil. And my cup is filled to the brim, to overflowing. This is what I have in my good shepherd. Another question from Spurgeon. Beloved, I will ask you now a question. How will it be with you if God had filled your cup in proportion to your faith? How much would you have had in your cup? Well, the day's done. The sheep are in the fold. And here comes the thought of deepest comfort, I do believe. Verse 6. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Mercy is a covenant word rendered steadfast love in other places in Scripture. Together with goodness, it suggests a steady kindness and support that you can count on, that I can count on, if we're following our shepherd. And the psalm ends with this calm assurance. David says this: not only will goodness and love, not only will goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David ends with the assurance that he will be enjoying the presence of the Lord forever, both in the days he has on this earth and the days beyond. He will be enjoying the presence of his Lord forever. You know, in John 14, we read this. The Lord said to us, I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. So, remember we opened with some questions about your happiness, about your life. I'll close with this question. Is there a place you lack joy or gladness today? Where does your heart need to be restored by the joy that comes from a relationship with the great shepherd? I challenge you, will you turn off your devices and set aside some time for restoration? Linda and I just finished a short devotional book, lasted maybe a month and a half. And every day's devotion closed with this phrase: He is where the joy is. He is where the joy is. Will you set aside some time for soul restoration, recognizing that it's only in Christ that you will have the joy that you're seeking? Let's close with prayer.